Okay, welcome to day 3 of working on my minimal timer project. It's been a while since day 2, but we're going to be doing some work here today, and I've done some organization and put my stuff into all into a folder. So we've got take 1 here, which was my last attempt at building the project. Lots of stuff in there, including an app icon and all of that, which I might use for this one. But in take 2 here, we've got the documents that I was working on in my last 2 videos. And in development, I've made a copy of a thing that I used last time when I was working on the project, which is bugs and features. So it's just a little spreadsheet here, which you can choose whether you want to report a bug or a feature, write a description, so whatever in there, whatever the name of the feature is, set a priority, and if you've got a version completed, or if it's a bug, you'd have version found and then version fixed, and then when it's done, you click the done button. And so I'll just show you what this looks like when it's actually full of things. Open timer project, bugs/features. Oh, bugs/features. And there you go, this is the one here. So you can see it automatically organizes the table. I've got a whole lot of sorting and filtering commands here, which organize the table into completed stuff at the bottom in order of their star priorities. And yeah, you can see it's a pretty easy way of keeping track of what bugs I've fixed and when the bugs appeared and when I fix them. Yeah, and so it was a useful thing from last time, and this time I figured I'd have another version of it that'll help out. Now, I'm not sure how to actually clear these stars, so I'm just going to delete this row. And there we go. Cool. So that's blank and ready to go for when we start making the project in Xcode, which is what I think I want to actually do today. I'm feeling like I'm pretty ready to start making some files, which is always a big step because you never know if you're going to make a mess of it or not, but I'm going to try and make it better than last time. So here it goes, and instead of that minimal timer, actually I'm going to have to go into my Xcode folder and clean out and rename that to something else, because otherwise I won't be able to call this project minimal timer. So let's go. So here's the thing about recording, you just forget exactly what you were doing. So if I just search Xcode, or if I just search minimal timer, actually, minimaltimer.xcode. Yeah, and yeah, so this one, go back to that folder. There we go. So we're going to call the old one. See, I've got a couple of minimal timers running around here. This is the one that I need to change. I'm going to change that to minimal timer take 1, I guess, even though it's not the first time I worked on it, but that's what I called the folder in the other one. I don't know. It makes sense to me, and that's all that matters, I guess. So that's minimal timer take 1, and now if I create a new project, I should be able to just call it minimal timer. So we're going to go with a single view app as our base here, because I don't think this interface really fits with any of the other standard app types. So let's start that. Declan Mabry Creative, that's my business name. So product name is going to be minimal. Ooh, apparently not. Minimal timer. There we go. So Declan Mabry Creative minimal timer. That looks pretty good. That's the bundle identifier, which is something I don't fully understand, but it's to do with labeling your app versus other people's apps on a device or in the app store and everything. So we're going to prototype it on my phone. that's good. Now this is actually going to be version, last time I left it at 1 and that made it kind of confusing, so I'm going to call this version 0.1 and then work up from there, because this is the beta version of it. Display name, now this is something that I've thought about with the last version, is minimal timer is very long on a phone, on a little app phone screen. There's not enough space to really have the full text, so I can either just call it timer, or if I want to have some kind of brand association, which I kind of do, call it M timer or M timer or M timer or M timer. I don't know. There's like a million ways that you could actually format that. At the moment, my favorite is with just the dash there, but I'm still thinking about it. And the other thing is I could just go with timer, but then it doesn't really associate it if I create other minimal apps, which I'm hoping to do. So it would really associate them together if they all started with M, you know? But it's possibly going to be a little more clean to just leave it at timer. I don't know. For now, I'm going to leave it as M timer, and we can change that whenever. So deployment target, I'm going to actually set that all the way down to 10.0, which I don't have to do. I could just start it at version, you know, iOS 12. But the lower you bring it down, the more devices it'll be able to support. Because there's some devices that haven't actually even been updated to iOS 11. They haven't been included, that people still use pretty widely, you know, like some of the older iPads and even like iPhone 5. And I think it's pretty advantageous to support those because people still use them. And yeah, and it's not too much different going from iOS 11 to 10. 9 makes a bit of a bigger difference. And that's why I'm not going to go all the way back, because really it'd be great if I could just support all the way back to iOS 1 and support all the devices. But it means that when you're writing your code, you have to break it up into sections for different versions of iOS. But yeah, iOS 10, there's only a couple of little things to do with notifications that need to be different. And well, that's all I've found out anyway so far. There might be other things, but that's what I discovered on my last attempt. So main interface is going to be main.storyboard. It's going to be universal. I did check that in my last project and it still didn't work upside down, so I don't know if that actually does work. But anyway, I've got it. I might as well check it anyway. It might just be an iPhone 10 thing that it doesn't work. I actually do want the status bar on light, but this doesn't seem to make a difference when you switch this box. You have to go into the info.plist and set it in the code as well to make it actually change it to light. So I don't know, I might as well leave it on light. Yeah, I'll put the app icon in the assets catalog, which is over here somewhere. There it is, assets. You've got the app icon there and any other images and icons that I want in the app. And also, oh no, sounds are separate. You would think that sounds would go in assets, but apparently sounds aren't assets. They're just files that are included in the project. So yeah, I've just noticed that my webcam is behind, so I'm actually gonna view float on top. That's a handy little feature, and now you can see the window goes behind it so that I don't block my face. So version 0.1, build 1. That's correct. So I guess that's the main stuff there. There's a whole lot of capabilities and stuff in here that you can go through, and some of these I will need to turn on, like push notifications. Most of the stuff isn't relevant because you don't need any iCloud. I don't know why that just disappeared then. Oh, interesting. Nice little crash. There we go, back where we were anyway. Yeah, iCloud's not really necessary because, well, you know, while it might be kind of handy to sync your timers across your different devices, I don't think it's really worth it. And, you know, it just adds a whole lot of extra functionality that people have to get their heads around, instead of keeping the app as simple as it could be, which is kind of the point of it. Yes, it did quit unexpectedly. Okay, that'll be sent to the developers. Good. So, wallet, yeah, no. I don't know why I just clicked on that. Anyway, my brain works weird when I'm recording. So, here we go. Main.storyboard. This is where you build the interface in Xcode, and apparently it's going to take a while to load. Just going to wait for that. But yeah, that's where you build the interface. You can drop in the different views and put in buttons and everything, and then link them up to the code. Some people prefer to write the code to generate the interface rather than creating the interface in here and then linking it to the code. But I don't know, I think it's a pretty powerful way to lay out an interface, especially if it's something that's pretty standard interface wise, you know, with just normal buttons and everything. It wouldn't be quite as easy for laying out a game, for example, because, you know, it's can be completely different, especially a 3D game or something. But yeah, for an app with just standard buttons and titles, I think it works pretty well. So I'm going to use the storyboard, and then yeah, viewController.swift, that's just a standard created thing that controls this view here. So you can see this is the view controller, and inside it, it has a view. The safe area is just, it's a new addition that came when the iPhone X was released because of the notch at the top and the rounded corners at the bottom. It's basically ensures that you won't accidentally have your content overlapping the edge. So you can see here the safe area is from the edge of the rounded bit all the way up to the edge of the top rounded bit, and won't accidentally let you accidentally hide your content. So yeah, that's where we start, and I'm probably going to have to do a little bit off camera now, because, or in time-lapse mode I guess, because there's a lot going on. So let's what am I looking for? Current projects, that's what I was looking for. Minimal timer, take 2, design. So I'm going to bring up some of these things here. So these were my display elements, and I want to put them into my into an actual interface. So I'm basically just going to have 4 views, I think, that'll be kind of sub-views for the main thing, and they're going to run all the functionality of the app. So let's get to work on that. Okay, so I've just run the first little prototype of this. You can see that I've made the areas grey, so that they look like the ones in this one, where you can tell them apart from the background. Obviously though, it won't actually be grey bars eventually, but yeah, you can see that we've got the bar along the top, which is where the settings, or the more info little icon's going to go, and then here where the controlling the time, setting the time is going to go. This one here where the recent times are going to go, and this one where the buttons are going to go. And this should hopefully be the only page to do with the timer running in the whole app, and then we'll have one more page for the settings menu. Not settings, I keep saying settings, whatever, for that menu. And that's going to be, I guess I'll just go with a view controller for now, and then that might end up being a table view controller, but we'll put that down there. And that's going to link to a button that's in there. So yeah, there you go. There's our app so far, looking good. And yeah, I'll create some files for these, because that's going to actually be where the code is that runs all of these things while the app's going. Oh yeah, I should mention as well, kind of technical detail. These are all embedded in a stack view, which I'm not sure if that's going to end up working out in the end, but the stack view is a handy little tool, because I need to stop saying little, but yeah, you can change the spacing between the elements really easily. I think that was on 56. And then you can also control all the elements together. So I've got them aligned to the edge of the stack view, which is aligned to the edges of the display. So I don't know if this works vertically. Not great. Okay, but that's something that I can probably do a lot more easily with stack view. We'll see about that. But one thing that it will do well is work on different display sizes, I think. Yeah, you can see it goes right to the bottom. I'm going to have to make the heights inside them relative. That's another thing that I've just noticed. So these heights, I set them to be an exact height equals 219, which is something that you should do very rarely when you're making a view layout, which I learnt last time. Because if you set it to an exact thing, then when you put it on a small device, so for example right on a 4S, you can see there's only 3 of those bars visible, because they go all the way down to here, because it's just too big for the display. So that's something I'll do. I'll change them all to relative sizes, which a relative size is basically where you have the display height and you say I want it to be half of the display height or a quarter of it, and then for the positioning you say I want it to be at 5% from the top, or 50% from the top, or 50% from the left, etc. Because then that means that it will be in the middle. If you say 50%, it'll be in the middle regardless of what the screen size is. So if you're on an iPad or a tiny little iPhone 4 or something, it'll always work. So that's what I'm going to do now, change them to be relative, and then yeah, I'll be back. Okay, we're back, and it's been a little while, but I've actually figured out what is going on now. So in previous versions of Xcode, well, the previous version when I was making my app last, it was fine to specify 2 inequality constraints, which is where you use the less than or equal to or greater than or equal to. And it was fine to specify 2 of those, and it would just go for the closest position it could. In this version of Xcode, it no longer likes you doing that, and what it wants you to do instead is use the priorities which are built in. So what I've got here, this is a clearer example of what I'm trying to do. So on an iPad, which is obviously a big screen, and you don't want to have the content going right to the edges. Can you imagine if these buttons on my little mock-up here, if this start button was the width of the whole screen, it would just be way too extensive. It wouldn't be a nice compact design. It would just seem like it was filling up too much screen. So you've got this readability width, which obviously makes the content in it more readable. So here I wanted it to stop at a certain point, stop growing at a certain point, and I decided 700 points would be a pretty good size. So when it gets to 700 points, it stops and the screen can keep expanding widening, and it will just stay at 700 centered. And then when you go down to a smaller screen, we'll go in portrait here, you can see that it just fits the screen width. So it's not still staying at 700, it's now shrinking to fit the screen width. But when the screen width is bigger than 700, it just stays at 700. And that's what I was trying to do before with the height. I wanted it to stay at a certain point after this, once the screen got bigger, or once the safe area expanded. So the way I've done that, and I'll just put this in landscape so you can see it really clearly, is I've got width equals 700, and I've got another constraint for the width, which is width is equal to the width of the safe area. So it will, or less than or equal, so smaller than or equal to the width of the safe area. So if the safe area is small, it will just be equal to the width of the safe area. If the safe area is bigger than 700, it will be able to be less than the safe area and also meet the other constraint here, which I've got at a priority of 999 instead of a priority of 1000, which is the default. It'll also be able to be 700 as well as being less than the safe area, and so it will default back to this lower priority constraint. And I did the same for the height of the area here, and you can see that it's the correct heights. Another change I made was I stopped using the stack view and just put it all in a regular view, because I don't know, stack views are just a little bit too limited. If you're making a very simple interface that, you know, for example, a table cell, and you just want to have, you know, text on one side and an edit button on the other side, or something very simple layout wise, stack view is what you want to go with. But for something like this, even though this seems simple, it's just not what you want, especially when I was getting to working on a landscape orientation, which I actually planned out here. You can see I've got landscape here now, and I decided that in landscape I'd remove the recent timers interface selection panel, because there's just not enough space. Because when you put the device in landscape, anything that's wide will actually take up more space. So you can see that it's basically, with this interface being designed for the vertical screen, when you put it on a landscape screen, it automatically just wants to be contracted down to have all of those very narrow, and putting things side by side doesn't quite work because there's just not enough space on the screen left when it's in landscape. You can actually see, especially on the iPhone X with the rounded corners, you can actually see when it's in landscape, the safe area is a lot smaller than when it's in portrait, because it loses this whole area at the side, this whole area at the other side, and this whole area at the bottom, and that makes a pretty big difference to how much content you can actually fit. Yeah, so I've changed my my layout for this to not include the recent timers panel, and I think that's okay. On the iPads, it obviously still does, because the iPads, even in landscape, still have all the sections. So for most devices, or for a chunk of devices, it's not going to matter that it's not visible in landscape. But for iPhones, I think it's just something that doesn't quite fit there. So yeah, so we've got that. And yeah, the way I did this layout was this vary for traits button here. When you select an iPhone in portrait and you go vary for introduce variations based on height, it'll just show you all the iPhones, because they are all the only devices that actually have a compact height. There's different levels of sizes that Xcode has. So you can see an iPhone's width is compact and its height is compact, whereas an iPad has regular and height and regular width. And yeah, that's a big difference there. And then there's little things like an iPhone 8 Plus or any other of the Plus variations. Their width is regular, and that's why in some applications, if you turn it sideways, you can have the table view with the left showing the selection, the left showing the selection and the right showing the rest of the content, because it is a regular width device. But most iPhones are compact. So if you introduce a variation based on compact height, which is there, that's all the iPhones in landscape, which is what I wanted for this. So I introduced that variation, and in here I removed this view, which is the view that contains the recent timers control. This view is the same height equals 100, that's the constraint I set for it, and then it goes straight above it is the timing setting view, and then off to the side of that is this little settings icon, or not settings, I always say settings, I don't know, that's just going to stick in my brain, just deal with it. So yeah, and they're centered, and their offset is and their width is based on this little offset between the not settings icon and this main, body areas. So yeah, anyway, that works now as an auto layout thing for all the devices. Obviously it's a little bit squashed on a 4S, but I'm not actually developing this to be able to run on a 4S because it only supports back to iOS 10, which, if I'll check, iPhone 4S iOS version, let's see, very quickly, latest, original was, so the latest iOS is 9.3.5. It started on iOS 5, there you go. But yeah, latest was 9.3.5, and I'm starting at iOS 10 here, so I don't actually have to worry about any devices that size unless they release a new one that's that size. So yeah, and I think on the tallest screen, iPhone SE or iPhone 5S or 5, that's actually a pretty reasonable amount of layout. You'd have your start, pause and cancel buttons in that area, and I think they would fit. The pause and cancel might be a bit squished. We'll see about that. We'll get to that later. Anyway, so yeah, that's auto layout. It's a bit of a pain to work with, but once you get the idea of what's actually going on, it makes a bit more sense. And so you just have to kind of mess around with it until you've figured out what it's actually doing, and then you can actually be productive. And it does. It is really satisfying when it all clicks into place and it all automatically resizes itself to fit with whatever device you're trying to make it fit on. So yeah, I don't know. It's okay. And the next step is going to be to actually start putting content inside these views. So if I just make this view, give this a dark grey color, you can see that this is the view that contains these views, and these views are each going to contain their own information. So this one's going to contain the settings icon, whatever, the not settings icon. This one, this second one down is going to contain that, or the time, and they're all going to handle them themselves. So that's where I'm going to start needing to make some new files here, because I need more classes to handle the custom behavior of these views. So yeah, I think that's pretty good work for today, and I'm gonna quickly start making those files, and yeah, we'll see if I get much more done today. It's getting kind of, whoops, I don't even know what I just did there. There you go. Yeah, it's getting kind of late, 6:16, probably time to have some dinner and wrap up working for the day, but we'll see what more I can get done. Okay, so there you go. That's what I've got done so far. Put some little buttons in there, and the more button up the top, which hopefully I'll keep calling the more button now that I've got it in writing. And yeah, these are in a stack view here, which I think is perfect for something simple like this. So if I only have one button in there, then it takes up the full width, and if I've got two, then they don't take up the full width. And yeah, there you go. It works on pretty much all the layouts. I might set an extra couple of constraints on the stack view itself for the buttons so that they don't get too wide, because you can see on here on whenever the screen's at its biggest at the 700, that's probably a bit too wide, or I don't know, maybe it's okay. We'll see anyway. Yeah, so I think that's a pretty good day 3 work. We've got our files here, and we've got auto layout close to done. So yeah, there you go. I'll see you in the next video.